to the stage Mark Stegeman. So Mark Stegeman is both the president of the TUSC Governing Board and an associate professor of economics here at the University of Arizona. He brings experience both in K through 12 education on the school board and higher education as a professor here on campus. Please help me welcome Dr. Mark Stegeman.
Thanks. I'm honored to be following Dr. Rodriguez, who has come to many board meetings and spoken passionately on this issue. And if everybody cared as much about what we're doing and was as committed as he is, I think education would be working better. That's what I like to see, whether or not the viewpoint is exactly what, agreeing with what the board is doing or not. That's what democracy is about. Originally, I think President Sander was on the program, and then he couldn't come, which is too bad because it would have been nice to hear his viewpoint. On the other hand, it might be good for me because if I said something he didn't like, he might cut my grade or give me extra work or something like that. So maybe that's good. I don't have much time, and I promised I would respect the limit as Dr. Rodriguez did. So I want to hit four points briefly. I want to talk about what were the original goals of this program as expressed by the board. I wasn't on the board then, but as expressed by the board in 1998. The political aspect of the program, of the controversy, why the board did what it did when it suspended the classes, and what we're going to do from here, the way forward. And so obviously to get through all that in 15 minutes I have to be pretty quick, but there is time for questions afterwards. So this program arose in the context of the desegregation lawsuits, which the district have embroiled the district for more than 30 years. It was not ordered by the court. So there's been some misunderstanding about that, but it was adopted partly to pursue the objectives that the court outlined. I think the board, if you go back and read what they said at the time, had two main goals. The first was to correct some narrowness in the curriculum, and I think that there's no way to dispute that that is there. When you have a 400-page book on American history, and the only Mexican-American who's mentioned in the book is Cesar Chavez on one page, that's a problem. And I think it's even more of a problem when we're teaching in Tucson, Arizona, because I think the history of the region is relevant to what we do here. So the board recognized that problem. That problem still exists in the mainstream textbooks. So that was part of the goal. That wasn't so much itself related to the desegregation lawsuit, but what was related to the desegregation lawsuit was a student achievement goal. There was a significant achievement gap at the time. Latino students in the district were performing significantly worse by almost any measure than other populations, and that's a problem because we certainly don't believe that there's any difference in capacity. So that's a problem, and frankly that's still a problem, and that's one reason that we haven't got out from the desegregation lawsuits, because the court has rightly been unsatisfied with our performance there, and I think objectively the performance of the district over that 30 years on that issue hasn't been good. So that's how we got here. I think everyone on the board supports those goals. I want to read just a sentence, those original goals from an op-ed that I published here in 2010 when the issue was heating up after 2281 passed, a bill which I opposed at the time, certainly still oppose. So this is what I wrote in 2010. Mexican Americans, like everyone else, want their history and contributions acknowledged. Filling that gap is educational value for everyone, especially in this region. Unfortunately, consideration of others' viewpoints has vanished from much of the heated rhetoric surrounding this program. Persons who want to build consensus rather than escalate the argument need to regain control of the conversation. Well, that's what I wrote in 2010, and I think we all know that isn't what happened. The argument from there just escalated. We didn't get anywhere near consensus, and it's more polarized now than it probably was then. So I think that's still true, but we didn't succeed. And that leads into the second point. I wanted to talk about the political dimension of this. It's obviously become a huge controversy. It's acquired national attention, and more important to me, I'm really not worried as much about what people in New York think, but it's very important what people here in Tucson think, and it's very controversial here. The community is very split. It's very clear from what the board hears that there are many people in Tucson who passionately support this program. There are many people in Tucson who are passionately opposed to it, and there's everybody in between on this issue. So it's we get political pressure from all sides. It also became a proxy issue for other matters. So I think the people, you can tell from how people talk, the people who are against the program, to some extent thought that attacking this was a way to attack Congressman Grijalva. I think some of the people who support the program thought that supporting it was a way to get back at Tom Horn. I think that for many people it became to some extent a proxy for the immigration issue on both sides. I think for some people it became a Tucson versus Phoenix issue, and the rhetoric was the board needs to stand up for Tucson against the intervention from Phoenix, which is a political argument and a feeling I share. The problem is that this is not, at least in my view, the board should not be making decisions that affect 50,000 students based on the political aspects or which political side of this war we want to get involved in. If we started making our decisions that way, I think governance in the district would go down the drain quickly. We need to, as much as we can, divorce ourselves from the external arguments and try to think what is going to be the best in the long term for the students in the district. And whether you agree or disagree with what we did, that was our guidepost. Trying to not be guided by who put on the most political pressure. I don't think that's what we were thinking about. And honestly, I don't even know where to say the most pressure came from, because it was so intense from both sides. So let me outline briefly then, trying to stay away from the political component, from the district's viewpoint, why 4 members of the board did what we did when we suspended the program in July, and I mean in January. And I think there were 4 things that guided, 4 ideas that guided that decision. Obviously, it wasn't exactly the same for every board member, but I think these were the elements at play. First, as everyone knows, the legislature was after us, had declared it illegal, and a judge had, rightly or wrongly, but the judge had the legal authority in this case, had said that the evidence was persuasive that it was illegal, and they were going to take away a lot of our money. Now, we had the option to appeal that. I think our feeling was that if we were going to appeal it, the best grounds for appealing it, for attacking this, the legislature, the ADE's position legally, was to make a constitutional challenge on grounds of vagueness. Because if you read this statute, it's poorly crafted, it's hard to tell exactly what it's talking about, and I think the feeling from the beginning was that there was definitely a chance, not a sure chance, but definitely a chance of having it struck down for vagueness, and that may still happen, because the teachers and the students are still in court with a lawsuit making that contention. And I think they have a chance. I don't know how good the chance is, but I think they definitely have a chance. It's poorly crafted. So that was an option for us. The problem was that even if we prevailed, which was far from certain, the legislature had signaled very clearly that it would rewrite a statute, come after us with something that wasn't as vague. And there's not much doubt they could have done that if they had spent their time doing it. There's no question constitutionally they have the right to regulate curriculum, and we weren't going to win on the vagueness challenge forever. So the question there was, do we continue to pour more money into a litigation that in the end we're almost certainly going to lose? We'd spent $180,000 in the first part of the appeal through the state, and when we have teachers, science teachers, who are buying their own lab supplies, the question was that money going to be well spent? Okay, the second issue was that there was no doubt that this program, after the board's initial action in 1998, had not been developed according to the guidelines in statute, in state statute, and in the board's own policies. The program basically went off and created itself without going through the board, without the curriculum going through the board, without proper oversight. And the MAS courses were not alone in that. There are quite a few things in TUSD we are figuring out that have that same problem. We just had to confront it first with the MAS courses because that's where the controversy arose. But we have some systemic problems in TUSD, and process is one of them. But the result is that it made it harder to defend the program, because the program, in some sense, after the board had said let's create it, the process of creation really wasn't entirely legal. So that was the first issue. The second was, I guess that's the second issue. The first was the legality. The third was that while I think it's important, and I think everyone on the board thinks it's important to present different viewpoints in classes, and I mean just not a narrow range of different viewpoints, but I mean really controversial viewpoints. People are hit with controversial viewpoints all the time in the real world. I mean, we get extreme rhetoric from the right, we get extreme rhetoric from the left. This is the age that we live in, and trying to keep that out of classrooms doesn't make any sense. Kids have to learn how to think about those controversies, evaluate them critically. The critical thinking piece is very important. And so we absolutely need to expose kids to a wide range of viewpoints, including stuff that's very controversial. The issue we had here, I think some of us had, was that in these courses, the overwhelming weight of evidence was that one viewpoint was being promoted much more than a countervailing viewpoint. If you look at the books and the curriculum materials, it's too strong one direction. It's almost all one way, and so that's not really observing the goal of critical thinking in the sense that you want to have clash of viewpoints. You want to say, here's one viewpoint, let's look at that side, see what the legitimacy is. Here's another viewpoint, see what legitimacy is, and have some conflict and see how we feel about it. That didn't, from the curriculum materials or from what I saw in the classroom, appear to be what was going on. So it wasn't the illegitimacy of the one viewpoint, it was the lack of balance. And the fourth thing I think that weighed on the board was that the program wasn't having very much overall impact on student achievement. And there are a couple parts of that. There is evidence that the students who went through the program had higher achievement than students who didn't. From a statistical viewpoint, and I just say this as an economist, I don't think it's very strong evidence, but there is evidence, and it's enough evidence that I believe that there's truth in it. It's not an extreme effect, but I think there's an effect there. I think Dr. Cabrera is going to talk about that. I asked him a few months ago if he would send me his study. I haven't got that yet, but would like to see it, because I don't think that what's been done that I've seen has been a very serious analysis. So I think there was some impact on the kids in the program, positive impact. I don't think it was an extreme impact, and the program was affecting a very small number of students. We've got more than 30,000 Latino students in the district, and we'd have a few hundred students in the program at any time. I mean, it was down to about 300, but even before that it was 600, 700, very small fractions the total. So when you look at the overall impact on student achievement, it wasn't moving the numbers very much. We have other programs in the district that affect more students and have more statistically measurable impact on achievement for Latino students and for other students. So it was a positive thing, but not an overwhelmingly positive thing, and it was very expensive administratively. So if you figure out the cost per student of this program, it was pretty high. So I think those were the four issues that weighed on the board as it made that decision. Where am I on the time? I wasn't paying attention.
13 minutes.
Okay, so I'm almost on schedule here. What's the way forward? I think, and again, I'm speaking for myself. The whole board isn't here, but I think that I am fairly close to representing the majority viewpoint on the board. We still have to correct the problem of unbalanced narrowness in the curriculum. I think it's very important to do that. It hasn't happened in the mainstream textbooks. We still have a huge problem with the student achievement gap, which we urgently need to address, and that's just not for Mexican Americans, it's for the Native Americans and African Americans too, but the Mexican Americans are by far the largest population of the three, and in that sense that's the biggest part of the problem. So we want to go back and try to address that. I think we want to create a new program, or we want to put, as the board said in its original resolution in January, we want to take content out of this program. We want to put more about Mexican American history, culture, including the controversial viewpoints, into the core that everybody sees, which means all the Latino students who go through the high school core, and the non-Latino students who go through the high school core. I think they need to see it too, and there weren't very many of those people seeing it under the status quo. So we want to do that, we want to affect more students, and we want to design it in a way that we get more impact on student achievement for dollars spent. And I think we can do that. And Dr. Petticone, our superintendent, has been working on that with some professors from U of A. I think the board will start to get back engaged with an issue probably April or May. We'll see how people feel and try to move forward with something that accomplishes the goals, both of those fundamental original goals, in a way that has a better procedural foundation, affects more students, is more cost effective, and won't raise as many legal issues as this program did. And I guess did I just about hit it?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll have time for questions later, I gather. Thank you very much.